Is Turkey the next target in the Middle East? Just hours after Israel launched airstrikes, www.aljazeera.com/news/2025/9/Israel attacks Hamas leadership in Qatar, all to know, against Qatar, a US-designated major non-NATO ally and one of Washington's closest Gulf partners. Pro-Israel analysts swiftly turned their focus to Turkey. In Washington, Michael Rubin, a senior fellow at the right-leaning American Enterprise Institute, warned that Turkey might be Israel's next battleground, urging the country to abandon its NATO reliance for protection. Recommended stories. Israel killed 10 children from this football youth academy in Gaza. https://video/news/video/Israel killed 10 children from this football youth academy in Gaza 2. Israel attacks Qatar. What's next? https://www.aljazeera.com//Israel attacks Qatar. What's next? Mapping the 21 illegal settlements Israel had in Gaza 20 years ago. https://2025/9/16/ Mapping the 21 illegal settlements Israel had in Gaza 20 years ago. On social media, Israeli academic Meir Masri posted, "Today Qatar, tomorrow Turkey." Ankara responded sharply. A senior advisor to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called the threat a dog of Zionist Israel, warning that the world would soon find peace only if Turkey was erased from the map. For months, pro-Israel outlets have increasingly portrayed Turkey as Turkey's most dangerous enemy, framing its presence in the eastern Mediterranean as a threat and its role in rebuilding post-war Syria as a new rising danger. Israeli commentators have also framed Turkey's involvement in the region as a threat, and its role in Syria's reconstruction as a new rising danger. With Israel's regional aggression escalating and its Gaza war showing no signs of ending, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan retaliated in August by suspending economic ties with Israel. In Ankara, this anti-Turkish rhetoric is taken seriously, with Israel seen as seeking regional hegemony, said Ömer Özkazilcik, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. Turkey increasingly feels Israeli aggression has no limits and enjoys American support, he added. The strikes on Qatar also underscored Ankara's doubts about US security guarantees as a NATO ally. Despite Doha's special ally status with Washington, Israel faced no visible pushback from the US, raising questions about whether the US would see Turkey's attack as an attack on itself, as the NATO Charter dictates. Unlike many Arab states, Turkey has long understood it cannot rely on the US or NATO for its own security, according to Özkazilcik. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now increasingly boasts of his country's regional expansionist goals. https://www.aljazeera.com/news/Arab Islamic countries condemn Netanyahu's Greater Israel remark. When asked about a Greater Israel, he replied, "Absolutely." For Ankara, such rhetoric is not just symbolic, it signals an Israeli vision of dominance that stretches across the Middle East, potentially clashing with Turkey's own regional outlook. On Sunday, Fidan told Al Jazeera that Israel's Greater Israel vision, which some religious Zionists believe extends into modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, and Jordan, aims to keep the countries in the region weak, ineffective, and especially to leave Israel's neighboring states divided. Over the last few weeks, Israel, besides its genocidal assault on Gaza and nearly daily raids in the West Bank, also attacked Yemen and Syria, and is accused of hitting the Gaza aid flotilla in Tunisia. https://www.aljazeera.com/news/maps Israel has attacked 6 countries in the past 72 hours. Against this backdrop, Turkey and Israel are already in a geopolitical rivalry, noted Özkazilcik, adding that Israel's actions clash with what the analyst views as the Turkish agenda to have strong centralized states rather than decentralized ones. Regional hegemon, the sense that Israel is trying to become the region's sole dominant power, seemed confirmed in July when Tom Barak, US ambassador to Turkey and special envoy to Syria, admitted that Israel would prefer a fragmented Syria. Strong nation-states are a threat, especially Arab states, which are viewed as a threat to Israel, he said. Ankara's subtext was clear. Israel believes it needs to be the hegemon in the region to feel secure. Israel's actions bear this out. It has bombed Syria dozens of times since December 8th, when former President Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow and seized Syrian territory in the immediate chaos. It decapitated much of Hezbollah's leadership. https www.aljazeera.com/news/Israel's military says it has killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in 2024 and still occupies parts of Lebanon despite a ceasefire, long seeking to weaken or destroy the group. In June, Israel attacked Iran, sparking a 12-day war that struck Iranian military and nuclear facilities, killing senior commanders and nuclear scientists, and dragging in the US. The attacks aimed not only to weaken Tehran's defense and nuclear capabilities, but also to push Washington toward regime change, targeting one of Israel's strongest rivals in the region. Israel may now view Turkey as the next potential challenge to its regional hegemony, explaining its adamant stance that Ankara will not be allowed to establish new bases in Syria that could threaten Israel. As Netanyahu has previously said, the first manifestation of Turkish-Israeli friction will most likely appear in the Syrian front in the land and air, warns Cem Gerdeniz, a retired Turkish admiral and architect of the Blue Homeland Doctrine. https://aljazeera.com/news 2020 9:30. Turkey touts past maritime conquests ahead of talks on dispute, a maritime strategy that calls for Turkey to assert its sovereignty and safeguard its interests across the surrounding seas, the Aegean, Eastern Mediterranean, and Black Sea. In parallel, Israel's deepening military and intelligence footprint in Cyprus, tightly woven with Greece and the Greek Cypriot administration under American auspices, is perceived in Ankara as a deliberate attempt to fracture and contain the Blue Homeland, Gerdeniz told Al Jazeera. To Ankara, this is not a defensive posture by Israel, but an offensive encirclement strategy that could threaten both Turkish maritime freedom and the security of the Turkish Cypriot people, he added, referring to Turkey's ties to the self-proclaimed Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which is only Turkey recognizes, rather than the rest of Cyprus, which is ruled by Greek Cypriots. The division of Cyprus is a major source of discontent between Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus. In Syria, Israel has made no secret that what it considers a stable Syria can only be a federal one with different autonomies. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar told European leaders in February. Turkey, on the other hand, backs the new Syrian administration, which insists on a centralized and unitary state. For now, tensions between Israel and Turkey can be described as controlled, says Gökhan Çinkara, director of Necmettin Erbakan University's Global and Regional Studies Center in Turkey. At present, the riskiest scenario for Turkey would be an uncontrolled outbreak of intergroup conflict in Syria. For this reason, Ankara is likely advising the new Syrian administration to act with a degree of rational pragmatism, Çinkara told Al Jazeera. The immaturity of Syria's security apparatus makes any potential intergroup clashes harder to contain, and risks turning it into protracted ethnic and sectarian conflicts. In the short term, therefore, adopting a unitary model seems difficult, he added. Red lines and risks. Netanyahu, for his part, is pushing for a Balkanized Syria, divided along ethnic and religious lines, demanding the demilitarization of much of southern Syria. https://www.aljazeera.com/news/just about the Druze Israel's rationale for its attacks on Syria, mostly populated by the country's Druze population. This move, if implemented, could ignite demands from members of other groups in the country, including the Kurds and Alawites, for their own tailored versions of de facto autonomy. Turkey, however, has clear red lines in Syria, says Murat Yeseltas, director of foreign policy research at SETA, a think tank in Ankara with close ties to the government. The US and Israel's attempt to reshape the regional order carries various dangers and risks, deepening fragmentation in the Middle East. Yeseltas told Al Jazeera. In March, Israel's most influential security think tank, the Institute for National Security Studies, INSS, published a piece warning against the nascent peace process between Turkey and the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK. https www.aljazeera.news/2025 7/11 PKK begins disarmament process after 40 years of armed struggle in Turkiye, which is seeking to close a chapter on a 4-decade armed campaign against the Turkish state in a conflict that has killed more than 40,000 people. The INSS warned that this could weaken the ability of the Kurds in Syria to continue to operate autonomously and contribute to Ankara expanding its influence in southern Syria in a way that could increase the threat to Israeli freedom of action. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, made clear that swaths of newly occupied territory in southern Syria will be held for an unlimited amount of time. As Turkey scoped out potential military bases in Syria's Homs province and the main airport in Hama province, in coordination with the newly established Damascus government, Israel bombed the sites. If Tel Aviv persists on this path, a conflict between Ankara and Tel Aviv will become inevitable. Turkey cannot accept policies that perpetuate instability on its southern border, said Yeseltas. But full-blown rivalry is not inevitable, as both sides recognize the costs of confrontation, particularly given economic interdependence. Andreas Krieg, Associate Professor of Security Studies at King's College London, told Al Jazeera. Israel's threat to Turkey is not conventional military aggression, but rather the targeting of Turkish interests via indirect means, said Krieg, speaking about Ankara's interests in Syria, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the South Caucasus. Given Washington's full and seemingly unconditional support for Netanyahu's bid to reshape the region, Krieg says Ankara's prescription is to strengthen strategic deterrence, especially through expanded air defense, missile systems, and intelligence capabilities, and to pursue regional coalitions with Qatar, Jordan, and Iraq, while maintaining open channels with Washington to avoid full strategic isolation. Ankara must recognize that future flashpoints are more likely to emerge in the gray zone, covert operations, airstrikes, and proxy competition than in formal declarations or diplomacy, he added.